Imagine crossing a street without knowing your own address. That's how life begins. Someone utters a sound that labels you, and that sound carries other people's dreams, invisible goals, combinations of pride and fear. Even in the first few months before you utter a single syllable, there's a script that hasn't been written by your hands, but it already dictates where to step. Every smile they receive and every approving glance indicates which trails yield affection, which shortcuts guarantee a place in the group, and which steps should be avoided so as not to alarm those watching. Who is this figure shaped by external gazes? Is it a faithful portrait of its nature or merely a showcase made to fit into other people's windows? Curiously, the answer is twofold. Yes, because we live with those who raised us, and no, because there is an inner corner that no amount of domestic instruction can silence. This synthesis reveals that identity and role-playing are mixed, but never completely confused. In childhood, every gesture is rewarded or reproached. Affection is so valuable that in order to win it, you collect approved manners. You complete tasks, raise impeccable report cards, adopt expressions that are considered elegant. There are well-behaved outfits, rehearsed phrases, likes that seem spontaneous. Everything is calculated so as not to contradict the standard. This social puppetry works for years because it facilitates invitations, eases conflicts, and offers comfort. However, the same armor that protects also squeezes. As the clock ticks down, an unsuspected grime of postponed desires accumulates. On the verge of adulthood, one senses cracks. That course chosen to impress the family, the job accepted to satisfy financial expectations, the relationship maintained simply for public validation. Each involuntary agreement pushes you away from the silent core that stubbornly whispers another melody. Then comes the exhausted dawn when the mirror gives you a strange look. There's no color, there's tiredness, there's a question that won't go away. Why does the heart beat to a different rhythm? And when the question becomes clearer, the veil falls. Emptiness is not weakness, it is an invitation to interrupt the show. At that moment, genuine curiosity arises. If all the previous storylines only served different audiences, which chapter will now finally be written in the first person? Everything seems perfect. A solid career, secure affection, frequent applause. Even so, a nameless sigh echoes among the achievements. No achievement fills that silence. Then comes the question that hardly anyone dares to ask. Who would be born if the stage were emptied? Without an audience, without comparisons, what would be the spontaneous course? The answer is often paralyzing because it reveals how much we live aligned with applause rather than genuine desires. When we face this gap, we discover that the current script was written out of fear of disappointment. The scene changes when we remember Carl Jung's concept. There is a broad core called self, distinct from social appearance. This center is not a resume, a label, a position. It simply exists, whole, sufficient. However, in order to function in everyday life, a facade has been erected. The I persona, which is useful, organized, productive, but limited. The problem arises when this facade believes itself to be the whole, clinging to medals, followers, and shiny titles. The greater our attachment to the surface, the further we get from the depth. The result is a feeling of emptiness, success without meaning, a glow that doesn't warm. This discomfort is the inner call trying to take over. Jung taught that fullness arises when the persona returns the steering wheel to the essential core. It's not a question of destroying the functional self, but of putting it at the service of something greater. However, the facade fears relinquishing control. It fears losing status. It fears crossing over into the unknown. To dodge this, It looks for extra rewards, additional goals, endless distractions, any noise that drowns out the inner voice. Even so, the call persists, soft and constant, reminding us that the real expectation worth meeting is the one whispered by our own soul. Accepting this invitation ushers in freedom. The persona continues to exist but is no longer in charge. The core begins to guide choices, transforming achievements into authentic expression, not a shield. And when this reversal happens, the echo of emptiness becomes full resonance. Finally, everything inside speaks the same language. A dream disturbs the dawn. You run through corridors that dissolve, while a familiar voice whispers that something has been forgotten. So the silent center, never eliminated, finds gaps to let you know it's waiting. For years, various maneuvers, extra tasks, shiny screens, social trophies have tried to push this call into the basement. It hasn't worked. It comes in night visions, hunches, crises that overturn impeccable plans and ask, where is the existence that has been postponed? Waking up, you realize that the decorated roles, efficient expert, predictable partner, impeccable relative, were acquired precisely to avoid this confrontation. They worked until the moment your breath became short for no apparent reason. Then you discover the price of ignoring this core. Every achievement has an expiration date. Every laurel has lost its flavor because they belong to the facade, not to the whole being. Carl Jung called this authentic center the self, and described individuation as the journey to reunite it with the other regions of the psyche. It's not enough to change apartments, learn a new language, or practice yoga if these changes only serve to renew the persona. The invitation is surgical. Listen to repressed emotions, recognize denied shadows, integrate neglected qualities. It means admitting that certain choices were made only because they pleased audiences, not because they resonated with the soul. This examination hurts. It requires breaking mirrors that used to return comfortable reflections, admitting inconsistencies, sustaining silence where there used to be justification. However, it is precisely this pain that restores vitality. Gradually, one realizes that external functions remain relevant. Bills need to be paid, promises honored, but they no longer govern the compass. The world remains, but it no longer dictates every step. It becomes the backdrop, not the director. To become an individual is therefore to learn to balance thread and blade, to live between community and essence, to fulfill chosen duties rather than imposed ones. When the persona takes on the role of helper rather than sovereign, an internal space emerges that no failure can tear down and no praise can inflate. Emptiness disappears, replaced by stillness that carries clarity. At that moment, all noise loses its urgency because the voice that echoes is now yours, and finally, it's enough. Taking on your own essence requires courage, because abandoning comfortable roles sounds like losing ground. It means reviewing ties, undoing certainties, realizing that many cherished desires were actually borrowed from living together. Denying this call, however, comes at a high price. Achievements look good on the outside but sound hollow. Completed goals convey brief euphoria but soon become a burden. The result? The bitter feeling of having acted for decades in someone else's script. The journey towards authenticity does not offer a definite arrival. It's a constantly evolving path. Each insight reorganizes priorities, each challenge reveals previously hidden aspects. Once the real core has been glimpsed, old disguises become as uncomfortable as tight clothes. It's impossible to go back to the previous version without feeling suffocated. That's why those who take the first step rarely go back. The main guide on this journey lives outside the rational field. While the day passes between to-do lists and deadlines, another inner instance articulates ciphered messages. It uses dreamlike plots, improbable coincidences, insistent images that appear without invitation. They are reminders sent by the unconscious, an ancient language made up of metaphors, universal figures, and symbolic repetitions. The logical mind, thirsty for exact definitions, tends to ignore such vocabulary. However, Carl Jung realized that deciphering these signs is a decisive step towards individuation. He spent years examining nocturnal accounts, delineating archetypes, showing that the psyche expresses deep needs through allegorical narratives. Each strange figure that appears in a dream, each situation that repeats itself until it attracts attention, is an invitation to integrate renegade parts of the personality. When inner eyes learn to recognize this code, decisions stop being automatic reactions to external requests and start reflecting guidance from the authentic center. Relationships, career, lifestyle, everything is reevaluated under a new criterion, whether or not it dialogues with that essential voice. The initial fear dissipates, replaced by lively curiosity. After all, discovering who you are every day turns out to be an adventure that no prefabricated achievement can match. Last night, a blue wolf crossed a broken bridge in a never-before-visited setting. When you woke up, you dismissed the image as fantasy. You went about your routine, checking emails, getting coffee. Hours later, in a meeting, a client brought up a metaphor: a wolf crossing murky water to illustrate market risks. Coincidence? Maybe not. Carl Jung would point out that dream scenes act as secret notes left by that inner region that sees far beyond everyday logic. Look at the circles that describe your trajectory. Partners with the same temperament, identical arguments in different jobs, choices that seem new but end in the same old discomfort. These reenacted scripts don't serve to punish, they serve to indicate gaps that haven't yet been integrated. While the message remains invisible, the psyche turns up the volume. Palpitations, a feeling of emptiness, crises that arrive without a calling card. Nobody likes it, but suffering becomes a loudspeaker when all other channels have been ignored. Denying this inner interlocutor therefore invites half of the human experience. It's like driving with half the dashboard blacked out. You're moving forward, but you don't understand the temperature, the fuel, or the actual direction. Each achievement quickly loses color. Each round of applause lasts seconds. The compass turns without direction. The remedy doesn't lie in repressing symbols or piling up distractions. It lies in accepting a dialogue with this silent master who speaks through images, synchronicities, and déjà vus. Asking, "Why do I always attract the same scenario?" already starts a conversation. Writing down dreams, observing repetitions, allowing intuition into decision-making, all this transforms noise into guidance. The rational mind will continue to be useful, but now it walks alongside an advisor who is older than any logical argument. When this cooperation takes place, purpose ceases to be a distant destination and becomes a daily practice. Each choice mirrors who you are, not who you should be. Thus is born a narrative written in the first person, impossible to copy, impossible to falsify, and whose authenticity ironically ends up guiding the outside world to respect what it has finally found a voice for. A simple awakening can change an entire existence. On any given morning, the old sensation of chasing the clock gives way to an unexpected sense, as if every daily bridge were asking for a review. When this inner beckoning is heard, previously mechanical actions reveal a new melody. They are no longer following invisible orders, but are now dialoguing with inner convictions. At that moment, subtle ruptures occur. Tasks stop weighing on us. Commitments become choices. Goals take on the scent of authorship. The central question then changes. What should I achieve becomes who will emerge from each decision. External achievements are still possible, but they become a consequence rather than a goal. The energy that used to go into pleasing audiences is focused on cultivating coherence between internal value and concrete steps. Thus, morning cleaning, difficult meetings, or evening studies take on new tones. They are expressions of those who become protagonists, not obedient extras. Synchronously, challenges keep coming. However, when there is harmony between action and essence, setbacks function as a creative tool. They show limits, open up shortcuts, reveal dormant talents. The wait becomes a laboratory for improvement. Each stumble adjusts the tempo, improves vision, calibrates intention. In this laboratory, purpose no longer seems like a distant object waiting to be found. It is formed, step by step, within the field where authenticity touches reality. Creating meaning, therefore, is a continuous act. Every dawn renews the opportunity to align gesture and identity. Sometimes it requires saying no to seductive invitations. Sometimes it requires patience with time-consuming processes, always demanding honesty with oneself. The more this practice is consolidated, the less room there is for voids imposed by other people's lists. On the other hand, there is a feeling of discrete lightness, the result of knowing that the path and the voice belong to the same source. The itinerary remains open, never finished. However, from the moment you live in harmony with your own essence, any scenario, success, failure, change, becomes a fertile stage for evolution. And it is there, in this permanent creation, that true existence finally begins. Self-knowledge is not an intellectual luxury, but psychic hygiene. Setting aside regular spaces for silence, whether it's a walk without headphones, a journal at hand, or the simple practice of observing one's own flow of thoughts, keeps the dialogue with the unconscious active and prevents old masks from sneaking back in. Small daily rites, when aligned with the essence, are worth more than big sporadic resolutions.